This is The Other 51. I'm Brian, and this week my guest is Arielle Beth Klein, a writer, actor, and playwright. Arielle, first of all, thank you for joining us this week on The Other 51. And gotta tell the story of how we inadvertently met at the Drama Bookshop in New York City a few weeks ago. We were there, my family was down there with our friends. We were down there. It was my daughter's Christmas present. You know, we're a couple shows and we go to Drama Books because you always go to Drama Books. And we saw you there. And can you tell the listeners what you were doing there that night?
Sure. Yeah, I was at the Drama Bookshop signing the first 5 copies of my new published play that the Drama Bookshop bought for my publisher. It was very exciting.
That is very cool. And you were with and it's funny because you were with our mutual friend Grace Aki, friend of the show. I think I can officially call her Grace Aki. She was on last year, and Grace and I had never actually met. We did the podcast and we've talked online, but we had never actually met in person. So I saw you guys were walking around, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's Grace. Talked to her, and then she introduced us, and then you guys walked away to finish they're filming the little promo video that Grace did, and I'm like, oh wait, I should have asked Arielle to be on my podcast. She's a writer. I have a writing podcast. What am I doing here? So then we connected, and it all works out. So
yeah, that was the craziest day. Grace is so good at all that stuff. I was so happy that.
Yeah. What was that like? So I'll throw a link. It's on your Instagram. I think you made a little promo video for the play. What was that like? How did that all come together?
The video part or just
yeah.
Well, so my publisher from Next Stage Press, Jean, asked me to go sign some copies that they had bought. And I knew that, I needed to document this. It's a, career milestone for me and also for him. He wanted some, to promote it because it's an independent publisher. So, I wanted to help kind of get that on people's radar. And so I texted Grace and I was like, if you have time for a social media question, I I need help with a reel. And she was like, yeah, ask me. And then I asked her and she said, just give me some times, I'll meet you there. And I was like, nice. Oh my goodness, she's so kind. And yeah, I mean, I knew Grace, we met doing Seth Barrish's solo show workshop years ago. So she was kind of there for the inception of this show. So it was really a nice full circle to have her kind of help me with that promo video.
And the show is My Shiksa Boyfriend. Congratulations on getting it published. That's awesome. It's so super cool for you. What's it like having signed copies of the play? First of all, what's it like to have this play printed and published and existing as a written work in the world, and then to have it signed at Drama Bookshop, which for the non-theater people who are listening to this episode is the famed New York bookstore reopened by Lin-Manuel Miranda. I mean, it is it is the must-stop for drama nerds in New York City. So what's it like for you to have a signed copy of your play in that shop?
I mean, amazing. It's like something that I never thought would happen. I sort of fell into playwriting at the start of writing this play. I just had this story sort of about my experience. Sorry if you can hear my dog coughing. Yeah, I had the story in me. It turned into a solo show, and then I became a playwright because of that.
Okay.
And since then, I've been working, and I've been in classes, and I have other plays. But it was just something that I never thought would happen, and to have it happen is it was so cool. I mean, I've been such a fan of the Drama Bookshop for years and years, and to kind of walk in there and see my name next to so many plays that, I mean, it was just magical. Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit about the show?
Sure. It's a solo play about growing up as a 3rd-generation Holocaust survivor and falling in love with a non-Jew, and what that means for me and for my family and expectations, and sort of with comedy about, growing up, kind of navigating my Jewish identity while my family was navigating their Jewish identity, and sort of how that all culminates in sort of experiencing falling in love with a non-Jew.
So you kind of mentioned that you kind of fell into the story and fell into playwriting. So how does one fall into playwriting? Where did this show kind of start as a play?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when I was in college, I was in this I think it was just a stage movement class, but the teacher specifically was teaching us commedia dell'arte, which is like those beautiful wooden masks. So she kind of just assigned me randomly the pantalone mask, which is the older woman mask, or the older person, I guess any gender. And she was just asking us questions. We were just improvising sort of on the spot based on the mask. And for some reason, I just started telling the story of sort of my grandmother and this Holocaust survivor that um, I had never really explored in art before. And actually, I had never really spoken to my mom either about sort of my grandma's full story. So in that class, I started with like sort of a 4-minute piece, sort of as my grandmother. And then I tried to sort of write a play based on that. I was kind of like really drawn to exploring this part of my heritage through theater. But it wasn't really me telling the story as her was kind of not working. So and then it took a couple of years to be like, okay, how does this story, what's my lens on this? And then I lived my life and I fell in love with a non-Jew and I was like, oh, that's it.
How is playwriting for someone who's never written a play but written a bunch of other stuff? How is playwriting kind of in developing a story? How does it differ from your experience from, say, a novel or an essay? Like, what is it about? What is it about this story for you that kind of lent itself to being not just a one woman show, but just a play to begin, a piece of drama to begin with?
Yeah, I think this particular story lended itself to theater because it really was about sort of sharing a very intimate experience with the audience in real time. So I thought having it live was important. Um, and there is a lot of, it's told a little bit in chronological order, but also in sort of flashbacks and flash forwards. And I think it's interesting when I've been in the theater seeing someone kind of go through childhood to adolescence to young adulthood, and to kind of visually watch someone go through that, I thought would be really interesting. And then also the fact that this particular story was based on my life, so I felt like, okay, I should probably tell this story. And that's kind of the only way I knew how, really, was to just sort of start talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
I think now I could probably write the gist of the story in a sort of multi-character format, but at the time, that's just kind of how it was coming out.
So you mentioned meeting Grace at Seth Barrish's workshop, and she talked about it, and he's of course legendary. What are some of the what's that workshop like? What are some of the things that you take from a workshop like that and kind of stuck with you? Maybe not just with this play, but just in general.
Yeah, he really taught me, and it sounds maybe obvious, but it wasn't to me, like just basic story structure.
Okay.
An inciting incident, what is the thing that hooks the audience? What are we building towards? And how does every story in the show has a beginning, middle, end, and then the whole show, right, has a beginning, middle, and end.
Mm-hmm.
So how does every story that we put in the show serve that end that we're trying to get to, the climax of the whole play? And sometimes there were so many stories that were in earlier drafts of the show that I loved. Oh, this is so funny. But ultimately it was, it was either serving a duplicate purpose, or it wasn't really serving the final thing. So you knew you had to cut it or you had to replace it. So really just making sure that as much fun as some of the stories can be, that they're all serving sort of the final thing. And so the workshop was amazing, and I think he still teaches it. The Barra group, we would sort of bring in a little story, tell it, and then we would kind of get feedback in real time from the audience. Okay, what did you hear? What did you think the point of that was? So that we're making sure whatever we're writing is what we want the point to be, the audience is getting to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sounds intimidating to me, to bring in these pieces and then to be getting that feedback. What was it like being in that room and giving feedback and getting feedback?
Yeah, I think it was, definitely nerves for sure. I also really went in, and I think I tried to even the more experience I get, I try to go into every class just being like a blank slate. Like maybe I have preconceived notions about what this thing is like, but really I'm here just to learn this teacher's perspective, and then later I can kind of piece together, oh, what was helpful, maybe what wasn't helpful. But I think it was a really supportive environment, and everyone kind of was in the same boat. And I think now solo shows are really popular, and people are really excited about them.
Mm-hmm.
And even in 2018, it was still kind of like oh, some people do this thing. And so it was a mix of people who either had a comedy show or an idea for a show or a full draft of a show. And so I think we were all just really excited to be there and support each other.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think solo shows have gotten more popular? I mean, from my perspective, I know Seth and Mike Birbiglia have done a lot of work, and I think of Mike's incredible work that he's done on stage and with his shows. But what do you think that is? That shift from 2018, that 5 years. Oh my God, it's been 2018 is 5 years ago. What is that?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. So what do you think in the theater world has kind of just shifted? Why has that shift happened? Do you think?
I think, I don't know. I feel like, I mean, one thing logistically is that with COVID, they're easy to produce, less of a risk, all of that. And I do think people are, I don't know, maybe this is not I mean, who knows? It's just my opinion, but I do think that audiences are a little bit more open to sort of like the more raw, nitty gritty kind of art pieces out there. Um, so I feel like, people are more excited to kind of hear a wide range of stories and people's specific experiences.
So I want to go back to a question about publishing the play, and this, forgive me if this is a very newbie question, but I'm a very newbie. So publishing a play, how is that different for you as a playwright than having a play produced? Like I know produced is in the show, but like logistically, you've published this play now. How is that different? How does that work if somebody wants to produce it? Like, what's that? What's the difference there for you?
Yeah, so until this point, I was the only person who performed it. And I would, based on whatever contract I had with the theater, they would pay me a writer actor fee, whatever. Now, if someone wants to perform the show, first of all, anyone, like any actor can maybe, they can pick it up, use it for monologues, for auditions, stuff like that. And then if a theater wants to produce it, then they have to buy the rights from my publisher in that way. So it's sort of, there's like maybe a middleman now in order if
Gotcha.
theaters want to produce it.
Yeah. What's it like for you thinking about somebody else performing your work and a work that's personal, not just the words you wrote or the story you came up with, but the story you came up with and the words you wrote about your own life? What's that like for you?
It's really exciting. I think the story, I mean, to be able to have performed the show is so amazing, and to be there with the audience as I was developing the show was magical. And it gave me a lot of anxiety. It was so like for various reasons. So I know that I won't be able to do the show forever. Also, I'll sort of age out of what the character is. So the fact that it's gonna hopefully have a life beyond me is actually really exciting.
I like the idea that you can age out of yourself here. That's kind of funny.
Yeah.
So what when you were talking about the scenes you cut or the stories that you cut from the show because they weren't serving that larger purpose, I have to ask, do you have a favorite or one that you love to tell but doesn't fit, or like what's your favorite like deleted scene from the show?
Oh, that's a great question. I wish I had like gone through my little archives, but one that comes up that I think really explains sort of uh my confusion with like my Jewish identity and my family's Jewish identity growing up was we had at some point in high school, my mom decided that she wanted to try being kosher, which means separating meat and dairy. So you have two different sets of silverware and plates. And as an adult, I look back and, oh, she was exploring her Jewish identity.
Hmm.
As a kid, I was like, I'm confused. Now we have two. And I would always mix it up because I wasn't used to it.
Right.
And so I remember having to like, oops, I mixed up the dairy, and I would like have to put it on the floor of the garage so that she could like cleanse it or boil it or whatever that you did to like re-kosher it. And I was like, the fact of like putting a spoon on the garage floor is like a very ingrained in me memory. But yeah, it didn't really end up serving the story.
Oh, why not? Just out of curiosity. Why didn't that? Why was that one cut?
Um, there were a lot of different versions of the structure of the show, and there were other stories about sort of me navigating my Jewish identity as a kid that aligned more with like the dating theme. There were some other themes that there were different main events along the way. And so once I chose one to stay that about the relationship, then everything else kind of
Gotcha.
had to lead up to that. Yeah.
So you mentioned when you were talking about the workshop and the stories, and each story has a beginning, middle, and end, and the story has a beginning, middle, end as a whole. And it struck me, in thinking about playwriting, like I think we think a lot about character development and that in playwriting, but story structure seems to be. It was like an aha head exploding moment here, where like structure is so important to a show. Can you kind of how important? What I don't want to say what's more important, character or structure, but they're most important. But thinking through the structure of a show, how do you do that? What's the process for kind of like how you structure? You have the story idea. How do you kind of work through what the structure should be?
Yeah, I think for me, whenever I have a story, it's always sparked by some specific event or some dynamic of a relationship that I've experienced in life. So then I think, okay, I always work backwards. I say, okay, what could the main event of this, like, why do I want to write this? What's the point of this? And that usually leads to some sort of main event to work off of. And then I kind of work backwards. So I'll go, okay, so if this is the main event, then what has to happen right before, which is sort of like the point of no return, right? Like what has to happen right before that that makes this event have to happen? And then once I kind of have that, then I'll be like, okay, well, where might this start? And then I'll start thinking about sort of an inciting incident, which is like the first part in a story and in a play where you're like, oh, something's gonna happen, or like the status quo kind of gets interrupted,
Hmm.
and it often relates to the main event. So I'll kind of work like that, and then I just kind of start writing, and I'm not sometimes I'll outline if it's like a film, I'll outline because there's a little bit clearer beats in that sense. But with plays, I generally just kind of start and then I kind of work in 10-page spurts.
Okay.
Um, yeah.
Any special, just 10 just because, or any special reason for that? Is that like a.
I started 10 because a lot of the places where I'll go to sort of read new work or I'll submit my pages for developing work, usually 10 pages is kind of like the max.
Okay.
Um, so, I'll kind of aim for that because I do need to very quickly hear it out loud from other people. I think sometimes other processes I've heard people will like wait for a full draft and then share it. And I'm like, no, even if it's like clunky, I need it in the beginning to hear it out loud. Cause if it's just in my head, it's like, who knows if this makes sense.
So, along with being a writer, you are an actor, stage and screen and voiceover, all the good stuff. How'd you come to acting, first of all?
I wanted to be an actor forever. I musical theater in middle school and high school, doing the school shows were kind of the place where I felt the most me, the most like free, all that jazz. And then I wasn't able to go. I just kind of didn't realize that film acting was a thing. I don't know. I went to a really small school and we only did musicals, and I'm not, super strong singer. So I kind of thought, oh well, that's that. Um, and so I went to school for education, and then I joined the student theater group in college, and I was like, oh no, this is the thing that gives me the utmost joy. So then I graduated, and then I just started training at the Barrow Group, and I've just been never left.
How does being an actor inform your work as a writer, and then vice versa? How's all your work with your plays and all that? How's that turn around and inform your acting?
I think the biggest thing that acting helps with writing is creating dialogue. If I say things out loud, I'm like, okay, how might this sound naturally? Because I think sometimes when I read works by like early drafts of, and even sometimes my own, right? Where if my writer brain is on, I'm thinking, okay, how do I get this information out? Not always does this sound natural? Sometimes it can sound a little exposition-y in my early drafts. And then I have to put on my actor brain and say, okay, if I got this as an actor, would this sound clunky? Okay, how might I make it, you know, less wordy and more yeah, like a normal piece of dialogue you would hear in life.
What is in general, and for you specifically, what's that relationship between an actor and a writer like on a show, on something? Is there a relationship, or is it mostly just the director? Like, what's that relationship like between actor and writer?
I think it depends on how early in the process you are. So if it's a work still in development, I think it can be super collaborative depending on what the as I'm talking as an actor, like if the writer is like, yeah, how does that sound? If they want any sort of feedback, sometimes I've been in rooms where I've been like, for some reason I keep getting tripped up here, I'm not sure. And then the writer's like, okay, let me go think about a different way to say this. Or they'll say, how would you say it? Okay, let's try that. So I think it depends on the people. And then if you're working on a published play or an audition coming in for a TV thing, like that's kind of set, right? So then you're getting information from the writer just from the script, versus sort of face to face. In my
Yeah. Along with everything else that you do, you also host a podcast about storytelling and creativity. I like this. This is why we're here. How'd that start? How'd that come about?
Yeah, thanks for asking. It's we've been on I've been on a little hiatus right now, because my writing, filmmaking has been kind of at the forefront of my life. But I started over the quarantine because I'm a storyteller. I love stories, and I'm someone who didn't I don't have a BFA. Like I've kind of pieced together my own education through different classes and workshops, and I was hearing a lot of people saying, "Oh, you wrote a solo show. I could never do that." And I'm like, "What? You totally can do that." And people just think that they need some sort of, I don't know what they think, but or they don't think that they have the innate. I'm like, everyone has innate storytelling. You know how to tell a story. You do. Do you need to learn the specifics of plays, screenplay? Yeah, sure. So I was trying to do that. I was trying to provide sort of the empowerment and some sort of like accessible resources for people to kind of tell their own stories.
So this came up as a question on my Twitter feed a while ago, and I love your opinion on it. It's just this idea of no other profession in the world likes to talk about itself and its process more than writers. And I think that's absolutely true. As someone, my reply was, some of us build entire podcast libraries on that very idea. Why do you? I'm curious. Why do you think that is? As opposed to like, you know, podcasters aren't sitting around talking about their process. It might be what tech they use, but nobody's as invested in it as writers. And I'm curious why you think that is.
The first thing that comes to mind is just the fact that because it is so individual and it will not ever be the same person to person. I think to build a podcast, okay, get this equipment, do this research. Like I think there's more sort of a logistical playbook that you could follow and be successful. And I think with writing and acting, anything creative, everything is so subjective and everyone has their own, process or quirks. So I think it's helpful sometimes to hear I love listening to writers talk about their process because I'm like, oh, that might be helpful to me. Or,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I also do that weird thing. Or I also stare at the wall for 5 hours and write one word and that's my day. So
Oh,
it
I
can
feel
be
so
also
much better about my
validating.
week. Thank you for that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just, I think it can be validating too.
So what are some of your process? I want to say quirks because I don't want to make them. I don't want to diminish them. But what are some of your individual like processes that you have found work for you over the years?
Yeah. For me, I really like sort of having I'll call it like a brain dump Google Doc where anytime there's something that I experience or I hear that I'm like, oh, that's interesting, I'll just write it down right away because I will forget. And then every time I'm looking for, oh, something's missing from this screenplay, well, let me go to my little brain dump and I'll kind of see, oh, anything here might fit or solve that problem. Also, taking walks, like being in nature really helps and being really kind with yourself where sometimes the work literally is staring at a blank page or staring at the wall and just thinking like so much happens that's not pen to paper. um yeah, so just allowing for kind of whatever needs to happen that day.
Yeah, I like your 10 page, and I know it's interesting because it's usually like a set piece that you need. There's a real utilitarian reason for it from you, but I've found that having that set amount that you're going to do is helpful because then you're not writing the great research paper or the great book or the great play. I'm writing 10 pages and I can write 10 pages or 5 pages or whatever. I can write a
Yeah.
section. I think that can be super helpful too.
Yeah, and then just allowing grace for if it's more ride it like ride ride the writing wave, right? Like you can do that. Or, if you're really stuck and you're getting like, okay, so I wrote 3 pages today and three or one or a sentence is better than zero. So
All right. So what are you working on next? What's got you excited professionally, the stuff that you're doing?
well, right now I'm actually in pre-production for a short film that I wrote that is kind of based on my grandma. That's in in my Shiksa Boyfriend, this is a little bit more of a historical piece, dramatization of real events.
Okay.
So yeah, that's kind of the thing that that I'm working on. We're hopefully going to shoot this summer.
So how did that how did you know where did that how did that story start coming out, and then how did that like become like you're gonna do it as a film, not a play or a stage show? How did this happen?
Over 2020, I took a screenwriting class because I was curious about that format. And so I was in this short film writing, I think it was a 10-week course. And I read a bunch of scripts. We learned how to break down scripts. And, film and TV, it's visual, right? It's more visual, and plays are about more auditory, right? The lines, I mean, everything's visual, but really, like, film is a series of pictures. And I thought a period piece, and the nature of this film, it's like they're trying to escape something, so there's not a lot of dialogue. And so I thought visually it would work well on screen. And so it sort of came out of that class, and then I worked on it for like a year afterwards. And
I can't wait. Sounds awesome. I'll have linked to the fundraising efforts and the Instagram on it in show notes. You've mentioned a lot of classes that you've taken, and not being a theater major in college, obviously probably plays into that. But what do you find valuable about these classes as someone who's not in college, who's out doing this professionally? What's so valuable? What do you take from them, and why are they useful for you?
well, aside from just structurally learning, sort of the ins and outs of structure of each of these particular mediums, having deadlines is really nice. Like, just being accountable to a teacher, to a class, showing up for someone else is always going to motivate me more than showing up just for myself for, an arbitrary deadline. That's why I think I also schedule readings with even friends. I'll be like, okay, I want to read a full draft of this in 3 weeks. Are you available? Great. So now I'm like, I got to get the actors the script. So then
Mm-hmm.
that kind of makes me finish stuff.
Well, that is like I'm a former newspaper writer, so deadlines are my life. But I always found since I got out of that, like you can't set a deadline for yourself with no punishment, right? Like you can set a deadline, but if nothing happens when you don't hit your deadline, it's not a deadline. It's just a time
Yeah,
on it's just a time on a page.
for sure. Yeah.
So what as someone who's been doing this and hosts a podcast about it and talks about it and love talking shop, what's one piece of advice you would give a young playwright, a young writer, or an older one, someone who's starting this? What's your best piece of advice that you can give them, someone listening it today, to kind of give them a little juju going into their next writing project?
I have two. One is write what's interesting to you, not what you think people want to hear, because you're going to be working on it for a long time. And if you're not excited about it, then it just becomes a super bummer, or you won't finish it. And the other thing is technical. And then when you ask for feedback, be really specific with your questions. Usually I ask, was anything unclear? What stood out to you? And then if I have, were you curious about anything that wasn't in it? And if, really try to stay away from, what did you think? Did you like it? Because really, if you like it or not, that's not really helpful as a writer, because everyone's going to have an opinion. What's helpful is the story clear? So I try to really focus on feedback as not sort of really open-ended, really specific.
The writing what you think about, what you think is interesting. I say that to my students all the time. It's like my favorite. I have to come up with a better name of it for it than the "oh cool" test, because it's a terrible name for it. But it's the idea, and I teach journalism, so it's the idea that you don't write the journalistic-y, newsy lead. Like if something happens or somebody says something and you find yourself saying "oh cool," that's your story, that's your lead. Because if you think it's cool, I'm gonna think it's cool. You're gonna think it's cool. The reader is going to think it's cool. And
Yeah.
I think I love hearing that from other people, because it makes me feel good that I'm teaching kids right. But also, like, that is such, I think, a powerful freedom for a writer of anything. Like, you don't have to write what you think they want. You write what is interesting to you, and that there's some power to that.
Yeah, for sure. And it just keeps you, I always say, okay, why am I doing this? Like, if my why isn't strong enough, then I'm like, I'll probably won't finish that project. And there's a zillion 3-page things that I have, and I'm like, oh no, that wasn't strong enough.
Right. So I ask everybody I have on the podcast this, so I'll ask you, what's the best thing you've read lately?
Oh my gosh, the best thing I've read lately. Do you want it to be like related to art or
It can be anything.
okay. This is gonna sound a little woo-woo, but I got this book from my mom called The Awakening to the Fifth Dimension. And
Okay.
it's basically just about being aware of ourselves as conscious beings, like beyond our physical, like this is my physical day. And it just really helped me put in perspective, like because I'm a worrier and I'm like, why am I worrying? Just do the things that I love, make the art that I love, try to connect with people. And like there's so much else happening besides just me that I just need to like kind of ride the wave of the universe. And so that has been helpful for me mindset wise.
Awesome. I will put that. There'll be a link for that in show notes, and there'll be a link to your website, your actor website, your writer website, all the information about all of your shows. And we can't wait to see what happens with the movie and hopefully see you on stage sometime. So, Arielle, this has been amazing. Thanks for taking the time. I appreciate you doing this.
Thank you so much for having me. This was fun.
Thanks for listening to The Other 51. Show notes for this and all of our episodes can be found at sportsmediaguide.com by clicking on the Other 51 tab. If you like the show, please consider giving it a rating and a review, either at Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. It really does help people find the show. Our theme music is by Ellie Moritz.